Our format today is Candace and I are going to be talking for about 20, 30 minutes or so and diving into all kinds of interesting topics. And then we're going to open it up to you guys to ask Candace questions directly to her. So if you're new to this format, what you do is just drop in the chat that you have a question for Candace. You don't have to put the question in there. We'll tee you up and you'll be live with the one and only Candace Nelson. So let me give you a little bit of background on this absolute rock star. So first book, New York Times bestselling author. Her second book, Sweet Success, which we're going to talk about today, is already a Wall Street Journal bestseller. In 2005, she opened the world's first cupcake bakery in Beverly Hills and started a worldwide phenomenon and craze, which I think people are pretty happy about, the cupcake craze, with a company called Sprinkles. She currently launched a company called Pizzana. We'll talk a little bit about that. She's the producer and star of 3 different TV shows, one called Sugar Rush, another called Cupcake Wars, and another called Best in Dough. She's an investor, she's a mom, and she is as sweet as her cupcakes. And I'm super, super excited to dive in and talk to her. But before we get started, Kathy Leckie, can you get us started? Huge shout out to Mike Perlow, who I think I saw on the call earlier. He's the creator of that kick-ass intro. Candace, that is how we introduce a rock star like you.
Wow, I am really pumped up. I mean, that was the coolest intro ever.
We
like
win.
I gotta get, I'm ready to box or something.
It's Monday Night Football. Until they figure out that we stole their song, I think we're good to go. So if I need to get bailed out of jail, Mike already told me he's got the bail money ready. So
I don't think they'll mind.
Candace, I am so excited to share your incredible story with this group. You're such a fascinating person. So obviously we're known as the Outlier Project, and we all identify as outliers. So let's start. So you were born in Indonesia. And when did you realize that you were a little bit of an outlier?
Well, let's just start with outsider. I think I always felt like I was an outsider. I was a little blonde girl with curly hair growing up in Southeast Asia. And so I definitely looked different and felt different. People would stare at me. When I was living in Medan on the island of Sumatra, there were people who hadn't seen that many Caucasian people before. So it was really clear. I mean, people would stare at me. And so I definitely felt a little different. But then when I spent time in the United States, I felt different there too, because I had this very unique, diverse set of experiences, and people didn't quite understand me there either. So I don't know that I felt even close to being an outlier until much later in my life, but I certainly started by feeling like an outsider.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So you took, I wouldn't say it's a traditional path, but you took a path that it seemed like what you were supposed to do. So you went into investment banking, and then you got into tech. And then I think there were a couple things that were pivotal moments for you where you realized, well, maybe this is what I'm kind of supposed to do, but this isn't really what I want to do. Tell people kind of how that evolution happened.
I was raised in a family that really believed in traditional education. And my father was a corporate lawyer, very risk averse. So definitely not raising me to take risks and be an entrepreneur. He himself had worked for 2 multinational companies his whole life. So there was this idea that you got a job and you just stair-stepped your way to success, because that was the safe and secure thing to do. Well, cut to coming out of college, working for an investment bank, then leaving to work for a technology company during the height of the dot-com boom, which then of course became the bust. I was without a job and without any prospects. And all of a sudden realizing that this whole security thing was a bit of a myth. Yep. And as I was sitting on the couch and trying to figure out what I was going to do next, I sat there and I watched a lot of Martha Stewart and Oprah Winfrey. And I just was like, oh, feeling so sorry for myself, and realized that I had spent my whole life doing what I was supposed to do. And now here it was, my life had just opened up. You know, the snow globe had been shaken, and I was like, what do I do now? So it just released me from any expectations. And I got in the kitchen and I started playing and I started baking, and I revisited this love that I'd had from childhood, because part of my way of connecting with home when I was growing up overseas was to bake the treats that I missed from home. I mean, these were analog days, right? I couldn't, watch Netflix. I couldn't email my friends. We were talking about airmail letters that took 2 weeks to get there. So that was my quickest connection to home, was baking. And as I was released from all these expectations of what I was supposed to be doing, I started doing what I wanted to be doing. And I found so much joy in that. Then, of course, 9/11 happened not long after that dot-com bust. And it just led to this personal epiphany for me that, listen, we spend a lot of time in our lives working. So why don't you want to do something that you are actually passionate about? So it led me to pastry school instead of business school, which was kind of the next logical step for me. And when I went to pastry school, it was kind of me testing my interest in baking. I knew I liked to do it as a hobby, but would I really like to do it when I woke up every day, had to put on my chef whites and really get physical in the kitchen? And I did. I loved it. I loved how tangible it was. It was so simple. It was tactile, making something with my hands and being able to give it to somebody and watch them enjoy it. There's such simplicity and joy in that. And I was just hooked.
I love it. So it didn't start with cupcakes, but eventually you had this idea, and I want you to walk us through kind of the epiphany of like why cupcakes. But you did it at a time, it might have been like the height of the low carb craze, like when everyone was like literally cutting all carbs or seemingly cutting all carbs out. So how did you get the idea for cupcakes? And then how did you recognize that there was a market when it seemed like there was this huge shift away from carbs?
Out of pastry school, I just wanted to be as creative as possible. So I started with special occasion cakes. I wanted to mold fondant and pipe with buttercream. And as creatively fulfilling as it was really a business dead end. I mean, I still was a business person, and I realized that this would never scale. And while I had just actually gotten married, and while I'd been planning my wedding, I'd noticed this new entrant onto the scene. People were opting for cupcake towers instead of the traditional wedding cake. And so I saw that and I kind of thought, oh, that's interesting. But at the same time, I was walking through the supermarket and noticing these cupcakes that were just generic and basic, and they were stacked in these plastic clamshells. and they were nothing special. And I just remember thinking the cupcake really needs a makeover. And I knew here I wasn't bringing some novel delicacy from overseas to the United States. I was just reintroducing something that I knew people already loved. And we'd all grown up with cupcakes. We, as adults, have great nostalgic feeling towards cupcakes. But at the time, they were still just a very basic kid's treat. So I thought in reinventing them, I could really, in elevating them, sort of expand the market beyond just, kids' lunchbox fare or kids' birthday parties. And if I could really put the cupcake on a pedestal, could stand on its own and really take center stage in a bakery all its own.
So interesting. So one of the things that you just said was it wouldn't scale.
Mm-hmm.
So early on, did you realize that you wanted to build a business that would scale and potentially be sold to private equity? And I mean, was that the thought?
Well, I was raised in investment banking where, people definitely, the goal is to found, build, and sell. But I mean, looking back at the time, as you said, it was the height of the low carb craze. No one had ever done a cupcakes only bakery before. Here I was looking to charge $3.25 for a cupcake when people were used to buying them at the grocery store for 50 cents. So all signs pointed to this was a really bad idea. And everyone felt free to tell me so. All my friends, my family, everyone thought I was crazy. There were landlords that hung up on me. So even though I had this fire in my belly and I had this gut instinct that I was onto something, it really was my own unique instinct because nobody else agreed with me on that. But I did start small. And this is what I say to other entrepreneurs, dream big, but start small. I started out of my kitchen in West Hollywood. And at first it was just friends who felt sorry for me and were buying cupcakes from me. And then they would inevitably tell their friends. And soon enough, my phone was ringing off the hook with people and I had no idea how they'd gotten my number. So that was a little bit of validation on my idea. And it was enough for me to start looking for a lease and thinking about, going all in.
How key was that zip code, 90210? How key was that to the success of Sprinkles?
It was really critical because it was a signal to what we were doing. Essentially, we were creating a luxury product, an artisanal product that was handcrafted that ended up being, and this wasn't by design, kind of hard to get your hands on, almost like an Hermes handbag. Yep. And so people say, okay, why Beverly Hills? I thought you guys were bootstrapping. You had no money. This is correct. We were bootstrapping and we had only a little bit of money to work with. So we found the smallest bakery we could find. And we were not Rodeo Drive. We were Rodeo Drive adjacent, but that 90210 zip code was really important for us because we were making a luxury product.
Yep. And so this went from something that, you're, like you said, your friends felt sorry for you. And so they're helping you out a little bit. Next thing you know, Tyra Banks, Oprah, Katie Holmes, Tom Cruise, you name it, like Sprinkles explodes. Tell us, and there's so many stories. There's the Tyra Banks story, there's the Oprah story, there's so many stories in there. Tell us about that explosion and what that felt like in the moment.
Well, it was exciting and exhausting and scary all at once. On day one, I had baked all night long. I had my cupcakes perfectly positioned in their little places in their cupcake case. And I thought we were all ready and opened the doors. There was a line out the door. And I was so excited. For years, people had said this was a terrible idea. And all of a sudden our customers were there. But the problem was I had not made enough cupcakes and buy like a multiple. So I thought people would come in and buy 1 or 2 cupcakes at a time. Isn't that how people eat cupcakes? No, they were buying 1 or 2 dozen at a time because you forget, here people had driven across town. They'd found parking in Beverly Hills. They'd already made that much of an investment in trying these cupcakes. They weren't leaving without 2 dozen cupcakes. So within the first few hours, our cupcake case was completely bare and our line out the door had become an angry mob. And here I was, all I wanted to do was like create a joyful place that brought people together. And, I really was moved by like the joyful and playful nature of cupcakes. And everyone was so mad at me. And I remember one woman coming in and screaming at my husband and I because we were just standing there sweating and apologizing to people. And she was like, you guys are so incompetent. You will never stay in business. And I couldn't help but just agree with her. I was like, you're right. We are incompetent. We can't get it together. I'm so sorry. And what happened was, it's so funny. I'm not sure that this would have necessarily happened in other places, but in LA, there's a lot of FOMO. And so the fact that people couldn't get their hands on cupcakes drove them wild, but it almost drove a FOMO, the scarcity drove a FOMO that actually increased demand for our product. And we became known for lines out the door. And all of a sudden the media came and stars started coming. And before we knew it, we had this incredible virality to our brand. We hadn't paid for any advertising or marketing. I had no connections in the entertainment world. I had just come from San Francisco. And it really was due to the fact that A, we were doing something different, and B, we were creating an incredible product, and people loved our story. And I was behind that that cupcake counter every day, telling people my story. I left banking to pursue something I loved. And here I am, I'm doing it. It's scary. Help me out. And people just felt bought into our story, and they went and spread the gospel. It was amazing.
Yeah. So our mutual friend, Megan Riley, I talked to her about her Shark Tank experience. And, it's like when you get that call, like, oh my God, I'm going to be on Shark Tank, like, pretty cool stuff's going to happen in your life.
Yeah.
Tell us about that call you got from Harpo.
Well, we had, it was 8 months in from our first location. We'd just gotten through our first holiday season. And there's a lot of gift giving that goes on in LA and in the entertainment world. And so the holidays, sprinkles was the gift to give. We were absolutely on fire. We were exhausted. There were nights that Charles and I rolled up aprons and slept on the bakery floor because there was no time to go back, get any shut-eye before we had to get back and preheat the ovens. So it was January, and we were delighting in the fact that maybe some people were going to be on some New Year's cleanses, and we might be able to get off work early for a change. And it was one of those slow sort of midweek moments, and the phone rings. Caller ID says Harpo Studios. And I didn't think anything of it because she had studios in Santa Monica. They ordered cupcakes from us all the time. So I just sort of lazily picked up the phone, and they said, hi, it's Harpo Studios. I was like, yeah, what can we get for you? And they were like, well, Oprah loves your cupcakes. And as I said, I watched hours and hours of the Oprah Winfrey Show. She was such an inspiration to me. I know I'm not alone in saying that, but she was like a God figure to me. And to hear this producer on the other end of the line saying that Oprah loved my cupcakes, I think I was speechless. And then she followed up by saying, and she'd love 350 of them. Okay, great. Where can we get those to you? In Chicago tomorrow morning for her show. And I just thought it's one of those calls where you just think, oh my God, how am I going to do that? But you just say, absolutely, hang up the phone. We had started cleaning up early for the day, and I just yelled at the back, fire up the ovens, we're going to Oprah. So we bake up and frost these cupcakes as fast as we could. Charles is trying to find a way to get us to Chicago. They had said they would send a courier, but all I could think of was the courier was just going to put those cupcakes, somewhere where they were going to get smashed, and my big, opportunity would be just for naught. So we booked a red eye. We went to the airport, clutching these shopping bags with cupcake boxes stacked up beyond the brim. And, going through security, taking every box out. Everybody was so annoyed with us. But all we had to say was we were going to Oprah, and we just got high fives all around. Anyway, we showed up at the show the next morning, 5 a.m. I was there before Oprah even. She walks in, she hadn't had her glam yet. And I just was like, oh my God, is this really happening? And cut to, she comes out of glam, she waltzes onto stage, and we watch from backstage as she proceeds to deliver a love letter to our little bakery. We had one location at the time, talks about how all the stars love them. They're so yummy. Cue all the servers come out with cupcakes for people in her studio audience. And Charles and I are backstage just pinching ourselves. And we're like, is this really happening? And sure enough, this was at the height of Oprah, and that Oprah effect was truly in effect. When that show aired, we were getting calls from around the world. We had lines that wrapped, two sides of our block for months and months and months on end. And really, this cupcake phenomenon started spreading like wildfire. People were calling us for franchises, but we were so focused on the quality of our product. We just wanted to do company owned, and people said, fine, I'll just start my own. And all of these cupcake bakeries started popping up across the country and even across the world.
You guys did an incredible job of building this brand. And part of that, I think, was through innovation. And two things in particular. One gets a lot of attention, the other one doesn't get as much attention. So the cupcake ATM might be the coolest thing ever. So I love that innovation, but then also talk to us about what's a whisper word.
So yes, thank you for saying that. I think everything that I do, and listen, I'm tackling pretty staid industries. I'm not working in high tech. I'm working with food. I'm working with cupcakes and pizza. These things have been around forever, but I'm looking at them through an innovative lens. And I'm bringing my background from investment banking and technology and everything that I read about all these different industries to play. So, when Sprinkles opened, it was actually pre-Instagram, but soon enough, Instagram took over, and whisper words were a way for us to cultivate this community online on our social media channels. And it ended up feeling kind of like a club. We would put out these offers, like if you come in today and you whisper red velvet, you'll get a buy one, get one free. So all of a sudden you'd be waiting in line at Sprinkles and the person ahead of you would be like whispering to the cashier. And it was like, wait, what's going on? What is this insiders club that I am not part of? And Sprinkles management community is such a buzzword now, and it wasn't back at the time, but I think you're right. We didn't get a lot of credit for just the incredibly engaged community that we built. And of course, the Cupcake ATM, very much an innovative concept. I like to say that innovation really comes from a very simple mindset, which is just what if thinking. I thought I came home late at night. I was hungry for a cupcake. I was pregnant with my second son. It was a hormonal craving. And so it was very urgent. And I couldn't get a cupcake. I'd eaten all the cupcakes in the house and Sprinkles was closed for the night. So instead of just sort of, I don't know, accepting the fact that I wasn't going to get a cupcake and going to bed like any reasonable person would have done, my husband and I started batting around this brainstorm, this idea of like, what if you could get a cupcake anytime, day or night? What would that look like? And I think that sort of embracing the crazy ideas, not taking things at face value, that's really the heartbeat of entrepreneurship. Leaning into personal frustrations, not just accepting things. So I do really like to bring that innovative mindset to everything. And I'm doing it with pizza now as well at Pizzana.
Yeah, it's so cool. This book that you wrote is unbelievable. So I think a lot of people, well, I'll tell you why I think it's so unbelievable. I think people might think it's a memoir, but it's not. It's like a roadmap. It's a blueprint. And I know that a lot of it was centered around helping women to figure out how to scale a business. Mm-hmm. But obviously, I think it applies to anybody. And I love that very tactical element to the book. Like, there's too much theory out there without like, do this, do that. And you have no doubt the recipe for success. I think a lot of people have ideas, but I always say to people, like, don't die with the ball on the 1 yard line. Mm-hmm. Like, an idea without action doesn't really mean that much. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's so true. It's all in the action. When I first opened Sprinkles, standing behind the counter, greeting everyone, there were so many people that came in and said, they look around, they'd be like, this was my idea. And at first I felt like something had been taken from me. Like, I thought my idea was so original. I really like went against the, grain getting this open. And then I realized, no, they were highlighting something very important, which was there are plenty of great ideas out there. But what differentiated me was the fact that I took action on it. And that's the difference between the dreamers and the doers. I used to think, to your point, like if you had a great idea, you were halfway there. No, it's all in the action. And by the way, action comes stumbles and failure, but that's where the learning comes in. And so don't be afraid of failure. Take that action. I knew, when everyone was telling me not to open Sprinkles, that the regret of not having pursued it would be worse than any failure that I could possibly have met with. And that's what ultimately got me over the finish line.
One last question for me, because the audience is going to, they're going to turn on me. It'll be a mob if I don't let them ask you some questions. What's the most common misconception of being a successful entrepreneur?
Oh, that once you've succeeded, that the work stops, maybe?
Yeah.
No, the work keeps coming, and every day you wake up and there are more opportunities and challenges, but that's the fun of it. It's the process. And I think I learned that in 2012, when I stepped away from Sprinkles. My husband and I sold the majority to private equity. We stepped away operationally. And that was the dream, right? That was what we had been working towards. That's what everyone in investment banking had led us to believe is like, you're successful now. This is it. And then you're just going to sail away into the sunset. And then I realized I really missed the struggle, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was the fun of the game and the challenge. And yes, I mean, a life-changing event like that was amazing. And we were able to buy a home after, cobbling everything together for so long. And I talk about my car that kept breaking down in the book. But no, it's really about, when you love what you're doing, it's about that passion and like getting to just get up and go to work every day.
Yeah, it's so many good lessons. We have people lined up. This is like Sprinkles. We have people lined up out the door saying, I want to ask Candace a question. So we're going to go to Indiana first. We're going to Andrew. You're up.
Thanks, Ken. Congrats on your continued success in everything that you do. My question is a little bit different. I saw your post about dry January, which was great, by the way, and your fantastic marketing of the guys over at Poison. Love Nicholas, everything that they're doing. So it, of course, drove me towards, do you have plans to step into the zero proof space? And if not, I'm just curious to kind of get your take on what your thoughts are, because I think that's probably arguably the fastest growing space within food and beverage right now. And as someone who has continually innovated different spaces, I don't know why I had this feeling that maybe you were going to step into that space.
I love that. I have to say, the simple answer to your question is no. This really was me just sharing something about my life and a challenge that I've been faced with, and hoping that it might help some others. But maybe let me back that up with the fact that I do angel investing. I have learned a lot about the space in the last month, and I do have people coming to me with opportunities, for example, potentially to invest in Katy Perry's, drink line. And I never want to invest in any space where I don't really understand it and I don't have knowledge of the whole competitive landscape. So I feel much better prepared to make any sort of investment decision. And I agree with you. This next generation coming up is not drinking as much.
Yeah.
And the downside to drinking, how toxic it is, not to be a downer. I love my red wine. I work in the hospitality industry. But it's not good for you, and it's not good for brain health. And so I think there will be a real winner in that space. I'm not sure who it is yet, but I do plan to make some bets.
Awesome. Good to know. Thanks.
If anyone hasn't checked out Athletic Brewing yet, they are absolutely killing it in that space. And I agree. It's a fascinating sector. Sunny in Arizona, you're up.
Hi there, Candace. Thank you so much for being with us today. I have to tell you, I probably have an unhealthy relationship with the sprinkles in Scottsdale here. That's okay. I utilize the store and the ATM way too often. We'll just leave it there.
Well, thank you.
With all, I love when people have this uber success and innovation, because it's like you can't be contained in a box. And so my question is, with all you've achieved and accomplished, how do you continue to push yourself into new and unfamiliar territory to continue growing and evolving?
It comes down to a growth mindset and being curious and always learning. I think for me, when I am scared of something, that usually comes from a place of not knowing very much about it, or not feeling confident in my abilities toward it. I'll take, for example, public speaking. I've done a lot of TV, I've done a lot of media, but I haven't done a lot of keynote speaking. And with a book comes some of those opportunities. And I have to be honest with you, I've been really fearful about those opportunities, but I knew that's sort of like a signal to me. When I'm a little bit scared of something, it's like, I need to walk into that fire, because if you're not growing, you're dying. And I hope that the second chapter of my life is just as relevant as the first, right? Nobody wants to be a one-hit wonder, particularly in LA.
Right.
So I definitely look at it as don't be comfortable or complacent. That is not a good place to be, particularly when you have the opportunity to be, right? I'm constantly challenging myself with doing things that scare me.
Good. Fantastic. Thank you.
Bruce in Oregon, you're up.
Candace is someone who used to be Beverly Hills adjacent. I feel a kinship here. Recently I had to give up sugar and carbs. And I love cupcakes. I love pizza. Also, being from New Haven, Connecticut originally, the home of the American pizza, shout out to Pepe's and Sally's.
Some good pizza.
The best. Even better than Italy, believe it or not. That's another story. So I'm wondering, what do you do for people like me who are part of this health craze and trying to maybe pivot with folks who are reading the ingredients with a fine tooth comb? And like, for instance, my naturopath said, you can have dark chocolate as long as it's 70%. It's got to be organic. The fewer ingredients, the better. So I'm curious to get your take on that.
Well, we are, based in LA. We have a lot of people who come in who can't eat gluten, who are vegan, who have a lot of dietary restrictions, and are just being healthful in their eating. And I think one of the things that sets Pizzana apart is not only do we have an incredible gluten-free crust. Now, again, there are carbs in it. It's not carb-free. It's not a cauliflower crust. But for people who are celiac or gluten-free, it has that characteristic chew and char, and it's as close as I've ever had to the real thing. But we also have incredible salads. We have grilled vegetables on the menu. We have vegan options. We have, gluten-free, vegetarian. And I have to say that it's, as far as the pizza landscape goes, we're very differentiated in that regard. And I like to eat healthy too.
There you go. Something for everybody, Bruce. We're going to go to the UK. We're going to go to Isabel, my favorite actress. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well indeed. Thank you. Hello, Candace. Lovely to meet you.
Hello, nice to meet you.
I sent you a message about my youngest sister. I'm one of 7, and my youngest sister is a pastry chef. So very inspired by you, and she's just starting out on this journey, and it's wonderful to hear your story. It makes me think of hers.
Thank
you very much for sharing. Are you here? I've just been Googling, madly Googling Sprinkles UK. But I don't believe so. Is that correct? Or you're not?
That is correct. That is correct. Okay. I'm no longer operational with the company, but I do know they are planning to start franchising internationally. So it may be coming. It's just not right now, and it's not imminent because I don't know about it, but they are certainly, if you know of any sophisticated franchise operators,
I gotta
Send
jump
them our
in.
way.
Isabel, maybe you want to be that franchisee.
Yes,
There you go.
there you go.
Maybe. I'm better positioned. I'm better positioned to support you with that walk into that fire that you just mentioned. I would be very delighted to do that. But my question is really about how did you first, and people that met me last week might remember that I have a bit of an obsession with this moment as a banker where you thought, enough, I need to follow my heart. Was there a memorable moment? Because I love your story about where the ATM came from. And I loved what you said about, as an entrepreneur, leaning into struggle. I think that is so true. But was there a moment for you, as you know, in that moment of, I'm leaving that behind and I'm going for this?
I don't think I was strong or brave enough at the time, because I didn't have that model for entrepreneurship in my life to be able to say, forget this, I'm following my dream. It really took me losing my job and being left with no prospects. I mean, there were so many people in the dot-com bust that left San Francisco that there was a 6-week wait for a U-Haul, because people were literally leaving the city in droves and no one was coming back. There were no jobs. It was devastating at the time. And so I was just sitting there on the couch, and it really was as messy as it sounds. I had no idea what I was doing. I was totally hopeless. I didn't have that really nice paycheck coming in. So all options were on the table. And so I think that challenge ultimately became the path to success for me, because I was so led to believe that I had to follow this traditional corporate path. I didn't know any other way. And I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. And I do think I give a lot of credit to my husband, who is my co-founder, who he, by the way, had his MBA and also left a finance job, which was hard enough for me. But I have to say, that's even harder for a guy to do. I mean, he got a lot of flack from his banker buddies. They were like, dude, you're doing what? Like, you know, the banker bros, they were like, you're going to go sell what? Cupcakes with your wife? So he had the fortitude to say, yeah, I think it's a great idea. And he looked at me and he said, Candace, I totally believe in you. You can do this. And if you get the recipes just right, I'm going to join you. And that was just the emotional support that I needed to be able to make that leap.
Yeah, that's massive. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thanks, Isabel. We're going to Florida. Alex Smith.
Candace, I love your story. I must tell you, from a loyal customer, I put this in the chat. When I walked into Disney Springs, I thought this was like Disney making it. This has to be Disney's magic at hand. And I'm like, is that an AT? What is happening? And you see the arms go to like the box in the shop. And like, I'm like, this is like, am I in this was in like 2017 or 6, like, this isn't like futuristic. This was like years ago, where
it was pre-pandemic, like this contactless delivery cupcake system. We thought it was just going to be a fun marketing gimmick. And then all of a sudden we're like, this is driving business. And now they're in airports, and as you said, in Disney and college campuses. So it's been really fun.
I had never even heard of the company, honestly. I mean, you know, and I found that, and I was like, this is what I'm getting every time I go to Disney Springs. It was amazing. And the red velvet cupcake was amazing. Yeah, I guess, you know, when I hear entrepreneurs' stories, like you always hear the end, but like never like all the middle in between, like you having that idea, taking action. It's easy to say that, but like it's hard to know what that looks like. So I guess I'm curious to know, like, when did you know, maybe I imagine maybe you've had some projects in your life you didn't have nearly as much success on as Sprinkles. So maybe like it's a 2-part question. One, like, when did you know, like, this was an idea worth pursuing, and then it could be something? Sometimes we need that validation. Maybe it's internal, it's external. We need some type of validation to let us know we're on the right path, or else like we could be doing our awesome cupcake thing, and then 10 years down the road, we're, you know, selling our house because of it or something. I don't know. But then the other side, like the other question would be like, when did you know, like, some projects you've worked on and put your, you know, heart into, sweat and tears, and maybe realized it wasn't something to be? Curious, you know, that inflection point for both those things.
So thank you for bringing up the fact that we all focus on the end of the story, the fairy tale end and the success, because that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book is I wanted people to understand all the messy first steps that have to happen. You know, everyone who ended up with something successful started with nothing, right? They started with an idea and they had to figure it out. They had to put the pieces together, find their co-founder, find their funding, bootstrap it, what have you. For me, because nobody believed in my idea, finding funding was never an option. So I knew I had to be really scrappy and bootstrap this idea. And I wasn't about to plunk down my entire life savings on, you know, betting it all on cupcakes if I didn't have some validation for my thesis. And so that's why I just started baking out of my kitchen. By the way, wasn't legal at the time. Now there are some food cottage laws that allow for that. But I was just baking out of my kitchen, taking the risk. And it was that day when Tyra Banks's producer called me and wanted cupcakes for her 30th birthday that I thought, oh my God, I am new to LA. I'm baking these little cupcakes out of my tiny kitchen in West Hollywood. And Tyra Banks is going to be celebrating with these things. Okay, I'm on to something. And at that point, then I knew, well, I got to go fast because what if somebody takes this idea and runs with it first? But I think Sprinkles had really so much success right off the bat that I didn't learn my hard lessons until later. I think after I'd bootstrapped and scaled, and granted, so many mistakes along the way, and I go over those in the book, but you know, from the outside, it kind of looks like, oh, I just opened this business, it scaled, I sold it, and it was just a home run, which it was. But then I kind of thought, oh, I'm good at this entrepreneurship thing. I got this, you know? And my husband and I started a few businesses and we kind of thought, oh, it's a good idea. We'll partner with some founders and we'll be off to the races once again. We got the magic touch. No, it doesn't work like that. And I think the thing that we learned that's so important is this idea of being so intentional and so focused. And even within the business of Sprinkles, and I talk about this in the book, we kind of lost the thread for a minute because I'm a creative person. I like starting things. That's something I've had to learn, like focus, don't just, you know, scatter everything everywhere all the time. We started an ice cream concept within Sprinkles and spent so much time working on that. It was so creatively fulfilling. It was fabulous. The product was amazing. Well, all those ice cream shops are closed. The business model did not work and it paled in comparison to the cupcake business model. And with the time that we spent working on that and having so much fun doing it, mind you, we could have expanded Sprinkles by 5 more stores and taken all that money to the bottom line and gotten that multiple when we sold the company. So there are many failures and mistakes, but the key is that resilience and picking yourself back up from the failure, taking the lessons and applying it to your next day, your next project, your next company.
Thank you.
Awesome.
You're well said.
Doug in Florida. Man, we're stuck in Florida here, which is not a bad thing. Doug, you're up.
Especially since you're coming down. Thank you, Scott, Candace, tremendous dialogue. Thank you for sharing your time and knowledge and energy with us today. My question centers around, trying to remember, I think you wrote a piece in Forbes recently, and you spoke about sort of selling through downtimes and the recession and things of this nature. And you had talked about avoiding deep discounts. And it stuck with me because there was something that you wrote about sort of avoid the temptation. It was like year 1 of Sprinkles, I think. And for all intents and purposes, you know, you could add to the top line with sales, but you held true to just if you can speak to that, I think there's wonderful lessons to be shared and learned. Thank you.
Absolutely. So we live in an Amazon world. It's really hard to compete on price. And if you are going after those customers that are really price sensitive, those are also really fickle customers because once somebody undercuts you, they're gone. So I've always been a really big believer, and this is partially because I work in businesses that there's not much moat, right? There's not much defensibility to a cupcake shop. And we saw that with the explosion of cupcake places. There's not much I can defend, you know, with pizza. So what I've had to really do is lean into brand and build a brand that is so that customers really have an emotional connection with, and a brand that is so desirable that people want to be associated with it. And actually, Sprinkles, I remember we opened our largest store in Palo Alto. It was our 5th store. And, it was our biggest store, our biggest investment. We were worried. We're like, is this going to take in the Bay Area? Everyone here is like such a food snob. And so we open, we've got lines down the block, and my phone starts blowing up notifications that the market is crashing. And over the next few days, I just keep getting, news articles. People are losing their homes. Storied banks are failing. And here I am selling the least essential item on the history of the planet, luxury cupcakes. And I was like, well, this has been fun. This has been lots of fun, but see you later, sayonara, big lines. And, Charles, well, this is it, right? And we ended up scaling the majority of our business through the Great Recession. And I think that really has to do with this brand that we built, and the idea that even as people's budgets were being cut, they weren't willing to cut their Sprinkles. That was still the affordable luxury that they wanted to treat themselves with, to actually, forget about all the bad news at the time. But if we had just been the, cost-effective cupcake company, that wouldn't have happened. And I'll tell you, I had so much pushback on my price when I first opened. Nobody could get their head around spending $3 on a cupcake. It was really groundbreaking at the time. I mean, we take it for granted now, and I stood behind that counter and I educated everyone. I'm like, you're spending $3 on a latte at Starbucks. Okay. This is what we do every day to make this cupcake. And we're baking it from scratch, and we're hand frosting it, and it's beautiful. And it's an artisanal treat made just for you. And eventually people got it, and it was great. But then the other thing I had to educate people on was the fact that people were used to baked goods being discounted at the end of the day. And the reason why that is because traditionally, this is how it was always done, and this is where innovation comes in. People would staff their one baker in the morning. They would bake what they thought they needed for the day. And so by the time you got there at 5 o'clock, those cupcakes were old and they were needing to be discounted. And so I used to see this sort of like group of people standing by the door right around closing time. And I wonder who they were. And then I realized they were waiting for me to discount the cupcakes. And I had to explain to them that we were using a just-in-time baking system, which innovatively I'd borrowed from another industry. And I was staffing bakers throughout the day so that the cupcakes you got at the end of the day were still as fresh. And so with that, and by the way, that's meant that we had waste every night. But that waste, I ended up donating to food banks and to homeless shelters at all of our locations. I would rather do that and keep the sanctity and preserve the sanctity of our brand than discount those cupcakes and make people think they weren't worth as much.
So good. So good. Randy, still in Florida. You're up.
Thank you, Candace. Real quick. If it wasn't the name Sprinkles, what was it going to be?
Sprinkles is such a good name. And I couldn't believe it when I thought of it. And, I did my search and it was available. It had been taken for, I think, children's clothing, but not for cupcakes. I did think for a minute about Candace's Cupcakes because I am a sucker for alliteration. I just love it. And I had built this sort of small but loyal following out of my West Hollywood kitchen, and people knew me as, they knew who I was. But I wanted the brand to be much bigger than me. And I also knew that if I planned to sell it, Sprinkles would have a lot more resonance than Candace's Cupcakes. Who's Candace? By the way, I don't think a lot of people who walk into Sprinkles now even know who I am anymore. And that's fine, because the great thing about a personal brand is you can take it with you. So now I've taken my personal brand to Pete's on it. But I think Sprinkles, as soon as I landed on that and knew it was available, there was never another name. It felt good to say. It was playful, just like the cupcakes, and it was aspirational, just like the cupcakes, because the sprinkles are the parts on top. Now, the ironic part is that I actually, in reinventing the cupcake, also reinvented the traditional sprinkle. Sprinkles became known for these modern dots, which are a much more graphic and modern design than the traditional sprinkles or jimmies, depending on what part of the country you're from. And that was an important piece of our branding, and I was actually able to trademark that. So as we encountered so much competition, but more importantly, imitation and emulation, people were knocking off everything they could, but they couldn't touch that modern dot. And that ended up being, really critical for differentiation and just value for our brand.
Very cool. Glad you arrived at it so quickly. It's awesome. Congratulations on all your success.
Thank you so much.
Our cleanup hitter today is none other than Mike Perlow, the maker of our wonderful introduction for Candace today.
So Candace, I have kind of a odd question for you, but I just think about things this way. So I always say, like, opportunities come our way and it's what we do with them.
Right.
But I wonder if you've ever thought about where you would be if not for the Oprah effect way back when.
Well, the Oprah effect absolutely set us on fire, but we already had an incredible business prior to that. I think it would have just maybe our brand recognition nationally would have taken longer to build. But the problem was we weren't shipping cupcakes and we were building this business, brick and mortar business, store by store, just ourselves. There was no franchising going on. So we had this incredible demand and we couldn't do anything about it. So it was a little bit of a missed opportunity. Now, having said that, when we did eventually go into Dallas and we did eventually go into Scottsdale, we were Oprah's favorite cupcake. People knew us by that. So we already had that introduction to people across the country. I just wish we could have gotten to it even faster.
Great. Thanks.
Of course.
Beautiful.
I'm really hungry, by the way.
I lied.
I know. I like to say I'm a walking kid's birthday party because I'm peddling cupcakes and pizza all the time.
Beautiful. We have one question left from Switzerland, the land of cheese and chocolate.
Chocolate,
Manoa,
the best chocolate.
you are up.
Hi, and hi, everyone. Candace, it's been a real treat just listening into the conversation, and I'm having a huge frustration, sugar craze moment here. There's no sprinkles in Switzerland, but this franchising is great news. I do have a curiosity, and whenever entrepreneurs share their stories, they always speak about their fear of failure. And every now and again, there's someone who also speaks about their fear of success. And just curious, was there any, crossed your path? And if yes, how did you go about it?
I'm sorry, you broke up just at the end there. Were you asking about fear of success for me?
Yeah.
I think there definitely was that, but I think it manifested itself in the way I thought about my business. I didn't always think big. And I think as an entrepreneur, you always have to dream really big. And I've gotten so much better at it. But I think, growing up the way that I did, I was raised to believe in what is logical and practical and safe and secure. And there's certainly nothing really safe or secure about building a national cupcake brand in the height of a low carb craze. So I wanted to temper my expectations. So I thought, in the back of my mind, I thought this could be a national brand, but we'll just start with one and we'll just make enough cupcakes that first day just to get through the day. Now I do things so differently, right? I start with the big, big dream and the big idea, and I just swing for it. But I think that was sort of ingrained in me, whether it was my upbringing, whether it was just some of the what we get, conditioning we get as women, right? To not make a lot of waves. But I think it was definitely a fear of success. It was just masked in a little bit, masked differently.
Thank you.
Guys, this has been an absolutely incredible hour. If you have not picked up your copy of Sweet Success yet, you have to do that. And Candace, tell us a little bit about where we can get Pizzana. There are retail locations, but also you ship nationwide.
We do. We ship via Goldbelly. And for Valentine's Day, we are doing heart-shaped pizzas in case anyone wants to surprise their Valentine. Obviously, that's just national within the United States. And then we're doubling the number of our locations this year. So we're on a big growth track. We have 3 right now in the LA area, 1 in Dallas. We're expanding to Houston and Austin. So we're going into Texas, just as we did with Sprinkles. And yeah, I think we are working on our distribution channels. We want to make our pizza easier for people to access. So stay tuned.
And I've heard nothing but incredible things. Chris Hetherington is a friend of mine, lives in Pacific Palisades, and grew up in Connecticut around good pizza in New Haven. And I said, how is it? And he said, unbelievable.
Oh, that's really kind. It is really good. Speaking from experience, and I can say that because I am not the pizza chef. Our head chef, Daniele Uditi, hails from Naples, Italy, and he is really a star. True pizza maverick, but that's meaningful. And Megan Riley came with her whole family to our new Dallas location too, which was so fun. Her girls are so cute.
Oh my God.
But I just want to say thank you to you for being such an incredible supporter, cheerleader of me personally and my book. You just are, you're such a generous and benevolent person. And this is such an incredible community. I just feel really blessed and lucky to have come to know you, and thank you for shining your light.
You are, you're an easy person to support and an easy person to love. So thank you for all the inspiration. Thanks for coming on. I'm looking forward to our next conversation.
Absolutely.
And at some point we'll meet in person. So I'm looking forward to that. So thanks again. Kathy, I don't know if you want to take us out. Our intro is now an outro. So
good. I love it.
It's so good. We got to listen to it twice. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thank you, Candace, again. We really appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
See you on LinkedIn.
Great,
Thank
Scott.
you.
Thank you. And Candace,
Great job. Great job.
Thank you.